Hello, everyone, and welcome to BizBuzz Week 9 meeting, where we are fortunate to get to host and learn from Brown University football alum and current Paragon sports agent and attorney, Joe Longo. Thanks for joining us tonight, Joe.
I appreciate you guys having me. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Well, we're thrilled to have you, and we also appreciate all of our members joining us tonight for this special learning opportunity. So without further ado, we will get the ball rolling. All right, so real briefly, we'll go over our agenda. So I'm going to hit some of what our next play is for our last meeting next week and some brief announcements. Then I'll introduce our esteemed guest, Joe, and he will share a bit of his life story. And then I'll lead a little bit of a discussion featuring our executive board. And then toward the end of the meeting, we'll allow for a little over 20 minutes of open audience question and answer. I'll be moderating that part. And so we ask that you please use the raise hand function during that time, or feel free to type your questions into the chat at any time. And as you guys know by now, here's our attendance policy. It will matter come this time next fall as we get to start to do more field trips and stuff in person. All right, so what's our next play? Next Wednesday is our last meeting of the school year. We'll just be having a casual little social on Wednesday at 6 p.m. So try and join us if you can to say farewell and hear from our seniors as they reflect on their time here in BizBuzz and discuss a little about what their next steps are looking like. It's also your final chance to connect and network with some of your peers before we all head off for summer. And you'll also get to debate some current sports topics with your fellow members. And make sure to watch out for Nick versus Arnav round 3. Those can certainly be a little contentious at times, and they're a lot of fun. All right. So now with all these administrative details out of the way, let's get to what's most important tonight, our opportunity to learn from Joe. So who is Joe? Joe Longo is a current agent and attorney at Paragon Sports International. He's a Brown University and Loyola Law School graduate. While at Brown, he was their starting safety for the football team. He's also recently been serving as an adjunct professor at Loyola Law School in Los Angeles, teaching sports law. And as some of you may have heard as people were spilling into the meeting, he will also be teaching at USC, doing some sports law this fall. So that's exciting, but obviously we got to say go Bruins. Sorry, Joe.
That's right.
Joe is also a member of the MLBPA Agent Advisory Board, the Sports Lawyers Association, State Bar of California, Los Angeles County Bar Association, Beverly Hills Bar Association, and the Wealth Council. It's a pretty sweet list right there. He's been a practicing attorney for over 22 years, and he's now approaching his third decade as an agent. He's represented and continues to represent 20 plus MLB first round draft picks, 20 plus MLB All-Stars, and 20 plus Gold Glovers and Silver Sluggers, including Christian Yelich, your 2018 National League MVP, and some of our members' favorite Dodger, Dustin May. I understand he's getting Tommy John surgery now, so we are sorry to hear that. But yeah, so with this in mind, Joe, will you please share with us a little bit about yourself, your story, and what's gotten you to where you are today?
Yeah. So I actually grew up here in Pasadena, and as Colin said, I played college football. I played high school baseball, but I was more of a football guy. And after I got out of Brown, I came back to LA and enrolled in Loyola. And when I was at Loyola, I never really imagined working in sports. It wasn't something that was really on my radar. I had finished my 4 years of college football, and I was kind of just sort of feeling like I was getting on with my life. And when I was in the middle of my first year of law school, I just thought, what a great job it would be to be a trial lawyer, a litigator. It's the same there's this same sense of preparation. There's this same sense of competition. It was a lot of things that as an athlete you could relate to. And at the time, being a young guy, I just thought, that would be a great job. And, that was kind of where I was headed. There wasn't, when I graduated, there wasn't any, internet or social media or anything to find out a lot about jobs like you can today. And so when I graduated from Loyola, I ended up working for a downtown law firm and doing the business litigation. And then about my 4th or 5th year out, this is probably the mid 90s, I ended up picking up a case, Dodger reliever who put 300 grand into a bad real estate deal. Needed help getting it out. So of course my boss says, well, you're the only idiot on this staff who probably knows who this guy is. And I said, I know exactly who he is. He's their 8th inning guy and he's really good, and he said, okay, well, you can he hated collection cases. So, this was my case. So I ended up representing Antonio Osuna, who ended up doing 14 years in the major leagues. This is probably year 2 for him. We ended up representing him, going to, took a year and a half, finally went to binding arbitration, won his case, got his money back, got his attorney's fees back. And we had become pretty close by then. And he had turned to me and said, hey, will you now be my agent with the Dodgers on my next contract? And I said, Antonio, I know exactly what you do. I just have no idea how much you're worth, and he says to me, yeah, but you can figure it out. And I said, no, I can't figure it out. And number 2, my firm will not do anything on contingency. They charge hourly. And back in those days, he was probably pretty close to the league minimum at 300,000 for the year, which a reliever like him now probably makes 600,000. And he says, well, what's the retainer? I said, I don't know, probably 25 grand. He says, holy mackerel, that's way too much money for me to spend on this, which, by the way, I now know no agent charges on a 1st, 2nd, or 3rd year guy, no legit agent, so I had no idea what I was even billing this guy inappropriately. So I say to him, look, I'll find you somebody. And, and I went out, I met a couple agents, big agents. I gave Antonio the phone numbers. He said, fine, great, thank you. A few months went by. I get a call. My assistant says it's Kevin Malone of the Dodgers regarding Antonio Osuna. And I'm like, why is the GM of the Dodgers calling me? And it turns out, I now know that you have to have contracts done before everybody gets on the field for insurance reasons. And he says to me, hey, I haven't heard from you on Antonio Osuna. And I said, like any good lawyer, I was trying to get off the phone because I had I didn't want to say that I'm not his agent and this isn't happening, So I end up telling Kevin I'll call him back, and I call Antonio and I said, what happened? How come you didn't hire any of those guys? He goes, just you do it. And I said, I don't know how to do it. He said, call the union in New York City. So in all of our lives, there comes a moment where you're at a crossroads in your business life where something happens and it's going to lead you down that path. And that was that moment, because I ended up talking to a 5th year lawyer who was my age, Michael Weiner, who was a Harvard lawyer and happened to be the guy in the office that day. The union in those days was much smaller than they are now. And I'm guessing there was probably 15 employees, whereas, the union's probably employing 75 people now. And Michael got on the phone with me and explained to me, what it took, to become a certified agent, what the value was for an 8th inning guy. And he walked me through everything. Okay. And they ended up giving me a provisional certification, and I ended up doing that contract. And ultimately that's how I got into the business and with my first client. Now, from that point forward, I was still at a big firm. I ended up leaving about 6 months later, opening up my own practice in Santa Monica with a buddy of mine, and ended up picking up a few more baseball players, and they were mainly referrals from my current major leaguers. And then ultimately, Matt Williams, the 5-time All-Star, hired me in '99. And then we had the first overall pick of the draft that year, and my life changed dramatically then, because I had a real superstar in the major leagues and then a top draft pick. So my law practice started going downhill and my baseball practice started going up. But I haven't, it was one of those things where that's my career as a baseball agent really took off after that. And I focused mainly on that. I've always been a practicing lawyer. My practice has changed on that side. It's changed. It's gone from, I was doing litigation back in those days. Clearly I didn't have time for that anymore because judges don't like to hear that you've got to be at a Yankee game in New York City on Thursday. I ended up doing some probate litigation because those are non-jury trials. But from there, I had a client, Mike Darr of the Padres, pass away in a car accident in 2001. And I represented his wife and children in probate court. And I'm like, how do all these guys not have living trusts? This is crazy. These guys need estate plans just like everybody else. They're high net worth individuals, and they need to have these documents to protect their families. And ultimately, I realized it's a real transactional area of law. Don't have to go to court. You don't have to be stuck in trial, for 2 weeks. And so as we sit here today, my practice has evolved that, I do some estate planning, some asset protection and tax work, but I'm basically a baseball agent doing the contracts of the team, the shoe deal, the glove deal, the endorsements. Paragon Sports, were like a medium-sized boutique operation with about 55 clients, which just over half of them are in the major leagues and the rest are minor leaguers. We probably do 7, 8, sometimes as much as 10 players in the draft every year. And I'm about, I'm over 20 years in, so our network's pretty good. I've got 3 of my former clients now agenting with me. All of them played professional baseball. All of them, are out in the field, all over the country. I think one's at the Big 12 tournament. The other one's at the SEC championships right now. And then we have another lawyer, Brian, out of Florida. And we have another young lawyer who's taking the bar exam right now that'll join us full time in August 1st. And we have a full-time marketing guy, a PR gal, and that's basically the staff at Paragon.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I also really liked how you mentioned that crossroads moment where you kind of knew, like, all right, I kind of want to go more in the sports direction. Another thing I found really interesting as well is you were talking about kind of those shoe and apparel deals and whatnot. Could you kind of walk us through what those look like and maybe some of the benefits that can come from them?
Yeah. So of the 3 major North American team sports, like a football, basketball, and baseball, I'm going to guess that baseball is a little lower paying on the shoe deal, only because we don't see kids wearing cleats, around town. Like, so it's more of a branding opportunity for them. Whereas in basketball, you can actually buy LeBron James shoes and wear them, so it's the numbers are a little bit different. However, all of our major leaguers are entitled to do their own on-field apparel deals for shoes, batting gloves, bats. The only thing they can't do is uniforms, okay? Because the team, that's MLB's area. They own those. We can do everything else. Of course, every year I have to take that roster and shop Nike, Adidas, New Balance. Those are the big players. Under Armour, those are the big players in baseball right now. It changes. Mizuno was big when I got in the business. Reebok was around when I got in the business. Mizuno's still around. Reebok, not so much. They usually entitle the player, if he will wear their shoes all season, okay, and that includes any footwear like cleats, turfs, running shoes. Let's just say he does a deal with Adidas. I tell client, you cannot wear Nikes while you're warming up. I will get a call, a very, salty phone call from somebody in Oregon who sees that. Okay. And so you can't, if you're going to do an Adidas deal, you're an Adidas person. You can throw out all your Nike stuff. Okay. Because you now are an exclusive athlete under there, and they're paying you for it. And what do they pay? It's usually a cash payment and merchandise. They get a certain amount they can spend on Adidas merchandise every year. Okay. So, and those are the 2 components, cash and merch. And then you have to wear their product all year long. And it's usually a head to toe apparel deal. So when you're getting interviewed after the game and you're not in uniform, you cannot wear a Nike hat if you're an Adidas guy. Okay. And they're allowed to terminate the contract. Have I had a company terminate a contract for somebody doing that? No, not in my 20 years, but if I'm sure they would not hesitate to do it if you continue to violate the terms of the contract.
Absolutely. And I saw that you represented Christian Yelich kind of, from the start. What could you kind of walk us through what his rise looked like, and then kind of maybe what changed in terms of like negotiation power and stuff, whether it be with like the ball clubs he's playing for or the apparel deals, media sponsorships, all things like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, Christian is an interesting case study because, well, first of all, just to comment on his career, like when you're an agent, like you have no business being in this business unless you passionately believe that all of your clients are going to be superstars. Okay.
Yeah.
And unfortunately they're not all superstars, but you start out that way. And he was no different because, Westlake High School, played a lot of first base in those days, of which he never plays now. Um, you know, and
Yeah.
and great talent, great swing. Everybody saw it. And then of course he signed out of high school and he got big and strong quick when he was with the Marlins. I won the first round with the Marlins, got big and strong quick, developed. That's a big thing too. Is a guy going to get better? Is he going to get bigger, stronger, faster, as he matures? And Christian certainly did all of those things. So he's solely responsible for all the success he's had on the field. Okay. It just so happens the Marlins traded him to the Brewers, and and that was in the January of 2018. And of course, who knew that he was going to win National League MVP in 18 and finish second in National League MVP voting in 19. And so career-wise, it went as sky high and as quick as humanly possible. Now, when it comes to sort of success in the sort of marketing area that you mentioned, in terms of endorsements or apparel deals, it depends on a few things here. It depends on clearly your success on the field. Okay, that's the number one factor, because if you're batting 150, you're clearly not going to get a lot of endorsement deals. Okay, but if you're having a lot of success on the field, you're in a big market. And what are those? It's no secret: LA, Chicago, and New York. Okay, any of those teams in any of those cities. Okay. And market, success of the individual and success of the team will translate into dollars, off the field. But of course, when you have as much success as Christian had, we're pretty proud of the marketing deals we've done for him, as Milwaukee's the smallest market in the league, yet he was able to achieve a bank deal, which are hard to get, a beer deal, which are hard to get, and an insurance deal, which are very hard to get. Those are big deals and big brands in sports, in any sport.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you also kind of mentioned, I like that piece about how you're like every piece of every guy you take on or whatever, you kind of view as like they're going to be a superstar and whatnot. And that kind of leads me into this question that I had already prepared, which was, have you ever had to deal with talent that maybe isn't so self-aware, like in the sense that they maybe aren't seeing reality with how their talent fits within their team and amongst their competitors at their position? And kind of how do you navigate those situations?
Yeah. So this is why I routinely recommend going to law school, because it gives you some training for 3 years on how to counsel people. I mean, if that's the one thing you get out of law school, you're doing a good job. Okay. Because we are counselors as agents. We provide a service. One of the most important services is, to kind of give you the information that you need to make decisions about your, business life or your baseball business life. And certainly in our case, giving a player the reality of where he's at, is sometimes can be a very difficult conversation, because he's got an ERA of 12 but in his mind, he's got an ERA of 1, like, but through experience, you meet a lot of these clients through the draft. You get to know them, you get to know their families, and you start to learn how to talk to them like adults, and you start to learn how to communicate to them like adults, and then it becomes easier to have those hard conversations. Okay. And sometimes you're just having hard conversations so that you can give him advice on how to get in whatever rut they're in. And like, one time we had a client who we noticed that his batting average was terrible during night games, but it was great during day games. And somebody in the office suggested he get his eyes checked, and that ended up being the problem. Something as simple as that. As opposed to complaining about where he was in the batting order, or blaming it on the strategy on the field, or blaming it on game situations. It was simply his eyes were the problem at night. He couldn't see as well. So, but again, on our day-to-day operation, if a player is not seeing the reality of what their situation is, they're going to and let's say it's a difficult situation, they're going to have a hard time getting out of it, because baseball is a lot of peaks and valleys. It's a very difficult game to begin. Even when you're playing well, a lot of players understand that sometimes doesn't always mean you're going to play well forever. You're going to have a difficult situation come up, and the more you're able to get out of those difficult situations, the more you'll be able to get out of them in the future. So like we always tell clients, like, it's a lot of coaching, or just discussions about, hey, if things aren't going well, don't wear it in the clubhouse. Nobody likes to be around a negative Nelly. It's a chemistry thing, and you got to come to the field every day knowing that this is a new day. Like, today is a new day. You need to forget about that called third strike in your last at bat last night, because if you're worrying about that yesterday, you're not going to play very well today. The sports psychologists always tell these guys, just worry about the next pitch, because and then you'll be okay. If you're worrying about things you can't control, or worrying about last night's terrible at bat, your career will be pretty short-lived. My most successful clients have a very distinct ability to forget about bad stuff. They'll be in the moment, they'll be angry about it because they're competitive, but they'll learn from it and move it on pretty quickly. And I've often thought about what makes somebody like that. And, it's DNA is a lot of it, good coaching, just going through it. There's really no secret sauce on how to handle bad things that happen to you.
Absolutely. Would you say that's something for you as an agent, kind of like, because as a football player and some of the other athletes on the call and just people in general, like kind of having to have a quick delete button, would you say that's something you have as an agent, and times where you've had to kind of lean on that and use it?
Because nothing, we also have bad days too. Like, we don't succeed in everything we do. We don't have players that we thought we have a lot of can't misses that miss. Okay. Like, I'd say half of my first round draft picks probably never played one inning in the major leagues. I mean, that's a pretty poor result if you think about it. In basketball, that would never happen, but full 50% of your first rounders never playing an inning in the majors. That's a pretty poor result. Okay. But again, that's baseball though. That's how baseball is. It's not like football, and it's not like basketball. So we deal with a lot of negative stuff, but again, even in the job itself, as my dad used to say, if it was that easy, we'd all be doing it, right? There's negative things in every job. I don't care what job you're doing. All of it's hard. And I often tell people who want to become an agent, I'm not sitting down at Dodger Stadium in the owner's suite talking to Andrew Friedman about Dustin May every day. That's rare when that happens. It's more minor. Like, I'm headed to Rancho Cucamonga tomorrow night to watch a single A guy, and I'll get back at 2 a.m. I mean, that's more common than, maybe the glamorous thing that people think this job might be. And it's a lot of nights and weekends, it's really a labor of love. You've got to like the job. And if that's not really your thing, then if you want every single holiday off and all your nights and weekends free, then I would say go work at the bank, because the bank observes all those holidays and nights and weekends, but not us. We don't have that kind of business. And so you really need to figure out what you want to do, because for me, I've somehow achieved a job where I'm having the greatest time ever, and I don't look at it like a job. Yeah, there's trying times, and yeah, I'm worn out, and yeah, there's long nights and weekends, but it at the end of the day, I love what I do, and that's kind of the goal, right? When you're getting out of school, is try and find that passion.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And kind of maybe for some baseball guys on the call, out of curiosity, when you're you mentioned like being kind of like a counselor to some of these clients. Do you ever have clients who are like late high school, early college, who are thinking about going to the pros, where like you're saying maybe that funnel process, like just because you're selected in the first round doesn't mean you're going to make it? Like say if it was someone playing basketball where they're going to make it into the NBA, if they're a first round pick, what's some of the advice you share with them when they're considering those decisions, if that's something you deal with?
Well, the good news about baseball is it's a very humbling experience after the draft, because they send you right down to A ball with everybody else, and your team, you may have signed for $3 million, but the guy in the lockers next to you signed for 1,000. Okay, and you all have like you're all on the same playing field, although the guy with 3 million does get more chances than the guy that signed for 1,000. But the point is, you start off at the lowest rung of the sport. It's $20 a day in meal money. You got to share a hotel room at the cheapest hotel in these small cities. It's 14-hour bus rides. They really humble you quick. Okay, it's not glamour. They take you from that Major League Stadium conference room with a picture of you signing the contract and getting the check to just the bottom barrel experience. And I tell you can get drafted in baseball either after your senior year in high school, and if you don't sign and go to college, then you're eligible again your junior year in college. I tell the high school draftees, for me, like, if you're not ready for all that, the long bus rides, you're the youngest guy on the team, and you're giving up going to UCLA, living the college life, probably meeting your friends that you will be friends with for the rest of your life. You got to be prepared to give something like that up, and it better be life-changing money and a big opportunity to go do something like that. Now, you get some clients who are like, I have no intention of going to college ever, so it's probably an easy decision, right? But you have clients who are on the fence, and that's where the counseling comes in. You need to just, like you guys do in your daily lives, you draw a line down the middle of the page and do all the good reasons for signing and going pro right now, and all the good reasons to go to UCLA and play first and get drafted in 3 years, and then kind of consider the pros and cons. For me, if it was my own son, I'm pro college. Like, I think if you go to college and play, you have a better chance of getting better and maybe going higher in the draft. And if you get hurt and never play again, you've just protected your downside because you're going to get a college degree. And then when you come out of college into pro ball, you're older and you're further down the line, so you have a quicker path to the majors. You spend less time in the minor leagues. So there's a lot of things to like about going to college first. Okay, but you're right, Colin, when you say I've got to sit down, every family's different. Every family, like one family might think, well, I'm not signing for $1 million. That's nothing. Another family might think that's all the money in the world. I'm signing no matter what. People have different views about money. People have different views about going to college versus just going to play pro ball. It just depends on who you're talking to and who the family is. But you, as their representative, you need to roll and respect their opinion, because as I tell my guys, nobody cares what you think. So I hate to break it to you, your opinions don't matter. Your clients' opinions matter, and you really need to listen to what they're saying and then give your advice, on what to do.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that, I guess, honesty and just being upfront with reality is a pretty important part of this business, and not selling smoke and mirrors?
For me, it is, yeah. But I don't know. Somehow my business attracts a lot of smoke and mirrors, proclamations.
Yeah.
But my dad was in the car business, and that business attracted a lot of those people. I'm in the law business. There's a lot of smoke and mirrors in the law business. I don't know. It's like, but I find if you take your experience and you speak professionally and from what your experience tells you, you will get the client to the right decision.
Absolutely. Yeah, I like that sentiment. I see a question in the chat from Paul, and then also I saw Zach's from earlier. We'll get to that in a second. But Paul's curious, how do you balance stepping back and seeing the big picture as an agent while also being individually invested in each of your clients?
That's a good question, Paul. It's funny because when I first started, and one of the pieces of advice I would say is I didn't do this correctly. Had I done it all over again, I really should have worked for somebody, because if you find a good mentor or somebody who's done it, you can get there so much quicker. You'll learn what not to do. Okay. You won't make as many mistakes. And so with my guys, I continue to tell them the same thing. Like, you need to learn. I've done everything possible wrong, and in this business, so you need to learn from me, because I'll teach you on what not to do wrong and help you become successful quicker. So when it comes to sort of, trying to find that right path or do the right thing, finding a mentor is a good way to go. Learning from somebody who's in the business is a good way to go. For me now, stepping back and giving proper advice, experience has a lot to do with it. Like, there probably isn't anything I haven't seen before in the business or expect, or luckily, I've had clients experience every kind of hardship, injury, just being a bad fit on a team. So when I step back and give advice to a client, I usually have a solution because I've seen it worked out before. It's going to be rare at this point that I see some hurdle that we can't overcome, and I think experiences help. And that's why I said, if you could hook your wagon to a mentor or work for somebody who's got experience, you too will have somebody to lean on to take a step back and see, where to go business wise.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Definitely sounds like it's important to have a mentor in that type of work. I know that one of our vice presidents of business administration, Nick Kahn, has a question for you. So Nick, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. Hi, Joe. I'm Nick. I
Hey, Nick.
appreciate you coming and speaking to our club. So I'm a huge baseball fan. And after the whole collective bargaining agreement discussions in 2020, I've heard a lot of rumblings that 2022 is going to be a huge year for the collective bargaining agreement. What are your thoughts on, is there going to be a stoppage? Am I not going to see any baseball that season? Or do you think it's something that's going to be able to be addressed early in the season, and we'll see a World Series in 2022?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Nick. It's always, I obviously have lived through several of these. And I started after the last work stoppage, which was in '94. But, I had heard a lot about it, especially from the Players Association lawyers that guided the players through that work stoppage. And it's unanimous that it was a terrible time in baseball. Generally speaking, there's issues that need to be worked out between the players and the owners. And yeah, it's really contentious. From a 0 to 10, it's probably a 9.5. But I haven't lived through too many that haven't been contentious. So, and I'm a glass is half full kind of guy, so that these are all normal parts of collective bargaining between the Players Association and the ownership. But as you work through the issues, and they're starting now because it does expire after the season, you hope that they can come to an agreement on most of the issues, and that they're down to just a couple of issues ahead of opening day next year. I think I'm hopeful that we don't have a work stoppage. At this point, we did have an work stoppage in 2020 during because of COVID, and it was a rather bad one because we only got 60 games then. Okay. On the heels of that, I would be shocked, but it's possible that we would have another work stoppage in 2022. Okay. But again, there's some major issues on the table that need to be worked out. I think there's going to be some bumps in the road, and I think there's going to be a lot of disagreement, but my guess is that sometime after New Year's, when we're on the eve of the season, that hopefully terms start coming together and the meeting of the minds happens. But it's hard to predict these things, Nick. It's hard to say how they're going to go because there's such a fluid day-to-day rhythm, week-to-week rhythm. It's just one thing after another. It's hard to predict. I wish I had a better answer.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. We appreciate it. And Jamel, I see your question, but going back to Zach's earlier, this was kind of on the merchandise stuff. He was curious just if you kind of share maybe what some of those numbers look like how much money they usually get to spend on merchandise, maybe how much is a part of the deals.
Yeah, on the cash portion, remember I said it's always cash and merchandise.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a rookie who's never played the majors or you're a first-time major leaguer, could be anywhere from $2,500 cash and $2,500 merch, all the way up to a superstar might be making $250,000 cash and 75 grand in merch. They're kind of all over the board. Again, remember what I said, it depends on the market you're in. It depends on the success you're having and the team's having. Because if you're a really good player on the Baltimore Orioles right now, it's a tough deal. Because, I'm just saying, if the team's not winning, like Baltimore is a decent market, but if the team's not winning, the deals just don't flock to that market. If the team's winning, you're playing well, and it's a good market, the terms will be better. But, in the NBA, I'm going to guess, the seventh or eighth man on the bench is probably making $1 million in cash. So you understand the differences between the sport.
Absolutely. And I'm just curious if you know of any like NBA agents and stuff and NFL agents, what would you say are the biggest differences between some of those sports from an agent perspective, like in terms of representing talent?
Yeah, it's definitely a different, sort of guidelines, laws, collective bargaining, just, the fees they charge. It's really a different animal. I mean, I guess we're all working in sports, but the way we might market a baseball player or do a contract is so different from the way you do it in the NBA. I mean, the NBA marketing wise, those players are embraced for being individuals, posting like crazy on social media, doing their own thing, showing who they are. In baseball, it's a little more conservative. Like it's the clubhouse culture where they may frown about a guy stepping out and doing a lot of his own thing. It's a different sort of setup in the clubhouse than it is in the NBA. And that's a variety of reasons. It's different commissioners, what they value more. It's just what's happened the last 3 or 4 decades, coming up. I think, go on in. I think basketball was always, thank you. I think basketball was always, for you guys are way too young to remember this, but when the ABA came along, they were using bright orange basketballs and the scoring was like 130 to 125. Like it was just a whole way more exciting game than the NBA. And the NBA finally threw up their hands and said, we got to acquire this ABA and make them part of the NBA or they're going to overrun us, But again, that was in the 60s or 70s. These are decades of things that have happened prior that bring us to today. And but the agents that I know in the other sports, we all deal with a lot of the same issues, generally speaking, on a day in, day out basis. But we just usually conduct business a little bit differently because each sport's a little bit different. So, and it's different time of years. Like my NFL friends are running around the country during the holidays because that's when all the bowl games are.
Yeah.
We're not doing anything that time of year, you know.
I'd say that lines up pretty nicely. Have you heard about like fee compression at all in the agency world? Like how we had a speaker last Wednesday, Jeff Locke, who was a former NFL player, who was telling us that in football, at least, some of these agent fees are going from about 3%, I think, on the contracts down to about 1.5%. Have you heard much about that, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I've seen that in football, and I mean, I've actually, that's been around for a long time. There's been some marketing endeavors to charge hourly fees. That's been around forever. It's interesting because I, as an agent, see what goes on day in and day out. The large staffs that we require to conduct business. As a lawyer, I didn't need as many people as we need in the agent business. Um, and the old saying, "You get what you pay for," rings true even in our business. Yeah, a football player can probably fee compress from 3% to 1%, but what is that 1% going to include? I'm going to guess it's not everything you would get at 3%. Number one. Number two, the one thing in my business, like when I first started as a lawyer, I would see a senior partner in the office and I'd be like, "Oh my God, that guy charges $1,000 an hour." And I would say, "For what?" I can't imagine it, because what they're billing me out as a first year lawyer at $250 an hour, I could do that, right?
Yeah.
But then the older I got, I realized that the $1,000 an hour guy could run circles around the first year guy. Number one. Number two, it takes him way less time to get something done, and he gets a better result. Why? Because he's got experience, and he knows what he's doing. And that's a main factor of why you're paying so much. And it's about relationships. The $1,000 an hour guy probably knows the judges really well. He probably knows opposing counsel really well. He's probably negotiated that deal a million times before. And you're paying $1,000 an hour and you're going to get $1 million. Now, if you pay the guy $250 an hour, I'll bet 9 out of 10 times you're getting less than the $1 million that guy negotiated. Okay, you might have saved on the fees, but you didn't save on the end result. Okay, and as we used to say in the law, it's something that I didn't really understand the first 5 years of practicing law on value, on fees. But then you start to realize that the value is in the fees. And by the way, whether it's 1 or 3%, the client's keeping 99% or 97%. I mean, it's to get more money, it's way worth it. You know what I mean? Like, it's whatever. If it's the 3% because he's getting that could be the difference between getting a 4-year deal and a 6-year deal. Okay, you get 2 extra guaranteed years on that contract. The 2% extra you paid is unfathomably valuable at that point. You see what I mean?
Yeah. So within the baseball world, what do some of those rates look like?
5% is typically the going rate. That's a pretty traditional rate. There may be reasons that people discount from 5%, but it usually has to do less services, less experience, less, and that's sometimes how it goes. Now, again, there could be a very good reason for doing it for less, but it's like you are in the business world. If you're paying less in fees, it's probably a less product,
No, absolutely. That makes sense. And there are some obviously like some giant agencies out there, like take CAA, for example, or like Wasserman or something. What do you think differentiates you guys from that? Like, I know you kind of mentioned boutique earlier and things like that. Could you kind of expand upon like how you would sell yourself to a client who might also be considering those larger firms?
Well, that's really just it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with those firms, and typically, you know, for us, we carry a smaller roster, and that's probably the biggest difference. Like, and if you're carrying a smaller roster, you're probably going to have more interaction with your clients, more services, just be around more. If I had a roster of 300 clients, I'm one person. I mean, clients 240 on are probably never going to hear from me, just because you can't do it. It's not humanly possible to get to know 300 people on your roster. Okay. But uh, for some players, it's comforting to know that you're one of 300. You know what I mean? Like, it feels better to be in that group. Um, we tend to sort of attract the clients who would like more of our time, more of our involvement, because I do everything from draft deals for a high school player to a major league free agent. And same goes for my staff. We're all involved in all that. Um, if you've got a large number of clients, as you're probably hanging in one of those areas. Like, you're either working a lot on draft deals and not doing too many major league deals, or you're doing a lot of major deals and not too many draft deals, which means that the high school guy's probably meeting different agents at the company through his career, in some respects. But, again, it's really just a comfort level for the client that wants, the big numbers, or just the comfort to know that they're at a bigger place, are probably not a good fit for us. And we usually know that at the first meeting or the first interview or whatever. We can kind of sense it, that this is not maybe a good fit. The client that wants a little more hands-on, with experience, with lawyers on staff who act, it could be a better fit.
Absolutely. Yeah. Fit is definitely very important. We have a real quick question from Jamel, and then Drew has a really good question after that in the chat. So Jamel quickly asks, you've talked about how you work with new and fledgling players, just trying to make it. How does the way you work differ with players who are more in the twilight of their career, like more veterans?
By the time you're in the twilight of your career, the business really well. So there's a lot less questions and answers. And in fact, a lot of our veteran players kind of know where they stand because they talk to the general manager directly. Like, they know these guys in the front office.
Yeah.
And so, but when you're a young guy, you don't know anybody. You don't know where you stand with the team. You're batting 350 at high A. You don't know why they're not sending you into double A. You wouldn't even know who to ask. There's a little more hand-holding and guiding going on at the lower levels for the newer guys. So you're a little more involved in the day-to-day parts of their career. Whereas on the major league side, major leaguers need less of that because they kind of know where they stand in the organization. And a lot of our major leaguers have conversations directly with the general managers. When I first started, general managers were very old, white-haired old men. Okay. One of my good friends in the game, Kim Ing, is running the Marlins. Every general manager seems to be very much younger now. It's a different time. Like, the general managers are younger, cooler, hipper. They talk to players. In the old days, they wouldn't talk to players because they didn't want to have any like emotional ties to any one particular player in case they had to trade him or cut him loose. It was just a different. So a lot of your knowledge would come from your agent because your agent talked to the general manager, not the player. Nowadays, the communication's better. We all have cell phones. We text with general managers. We talk to them. We keep in constant communication with front offices so we can tell our clients where they're at, and that seems to go much better nowadays.
Yeah, no, definitely. It sounds like the dynamics are definitely changing for the better.
Yeah.
And so Drew says, not everyone will be able to experience what you experienced getting your first client, unfortunately. He knows that you mentioned that you would recommend working for someone to gain experience and learn. A lot of us are interested in becoming agents ourselves. However, there seems to be a limited number of opportunities at a lot of these sports agencies. If none of us end up getting the opportunity to work for someone else and learn, what advice would you give us to start off our career as a sport agent? And then there's another follow-up, and I'll ask that after that one.
Well, the interesting thing about this business or any other business is it's going to be hard. Okay. So there's no such thing as a fallback like, well, I can't get a job or I can't get a client. A lot of us are real idiots in that respect in the business because we just never saw it as a failure or hard. Trust me when I tell you, I got told no a lot when I started. I got told I'd like to hire you, but you're too young. You're too inexperienced. You don't have enough experience. I'd hire you someday. You're a nice guy, but you don't know what you're doing. I heard all that stuff. But for me, when I hear no, or I heard all that stuff, it was just like, all right, I would, in my mind, it just wasn't a good fit for a client. I'm going to go find someone who is. And, looking back at the time, I didn't think I was, I now know I was lucky, but, I realized that, I'm just going to go find somebody who does appreciate me for my talents, and I'll keep trying until I do, keep plugging away. And luckily I was too dumb and too stubborn to give up on that hope. And ultimately, Matt Williams hired me, which was a big hire for me. When I got my first round pick, I know he took a lot of crap for hiring me because I never had a first round pick before. Okay. But luckily our relationship, I had spent a long time recruiting him, probably a year or more. And luckily our relationship was strong enough that he was okay with taking all that crap. But I'm lucky enough that guy and I met, but looking back on it, yeah, I consider myself extremely lucky and extremely blessed. But, Matt Williams is still my client. He's managing in Korea right now. When I talked to him about it, he said, well, I hired you because you had no clients. I like that you had no clients. But at the time, I didn't think that. I thought I did a great job selling it. But now I realize he only hired me because I had no clients. So you got to find the guy who wants you that you have no clients. That's just how it goes. And if every person keeps telling you no, or you're too young, or you don't have enough experience, or I can't give you a job, you got to keep trying. And I know it's easy to say, and it sounds simple to say, but you need to go back to the drawing board and figure out what your next move is, because that's how you're going to really be successful. And even if you're not an agent, you'll be successful in anything else you do, because you're taking no, and then you're taking a step back and figuring out your next move to get to yes.
Oh, absolutely. So I think you kind of touched on some of these already towards the latter half of his question, which was, how do most sports agents usually get their first clients having never represented anyone beforehand? And how do you gain enough credibility in those up and coming athletes who don't necessarily know you? Like obviously with that Matt Williams situation seemed to work out pretty well. But prior to that happening, how were you kind of trying to sell yourself as someone?
At that time, I was just selling myself as a lawyer,
Okay.
because I thought that my skill set as a lawyer would translate well to representing you in your contract negotiations. And that's what I stuck with, because that's what I had. So you got to sell your strengths, and to be honest with you, I remember back in those days, I was doing a really good job with a major leaguer who I thought was going to become my client, but then he had it down to like 3 agents. And he went to the general manager who he kind of knew and said, hey, I'm thinking about these 3 guys. He said, sure, give me the names, and I'll tell you about them. And when he got to my name, the general manager responded, Joe who? And that was the end of that. Okay. So I did not get that guy as a client. Okay. And he told me the story after he hired me years after that. And, I realized, you got to sell your strengths, whatever that is. Okay. And and all I had to hang my hat on was my ability as a lawyer. Okay. And my ability to, go and sell your strengths to a team and get you the maximum dollars on your deal. That was my strength. So I stuck with it. Okay. Yeah. Do I sell different things now? Yeah, I do sell different things now, but go look back at, your your history exam 5 years ago, or your freshman year if you're a senior, way you were writing then is so different than the way you're writing now. So I think when you're talking about how do I get my first or what, first of all, you got to try and be around whatever sport you want to get involved in. Okay. So figure out how to get around the clients. Okay. And then number two, and in my case, it was just meeting, I had one or two major leaguers. It was meeting their teammates or meeting other people that they knew in baseball and continuing to hang around those people. Okay. And number two, then selling your strengths, because it's a feel thing and a gut thing. And by the way, this happens even when you're hiring anybody. If you like a person or you feel an affinity to a person or you click with a person, you'll hire them. Like, let's face it, in Southern California, there's probably like, 12 or 10 or whatever legit baseball agencies. Okay. So if we're talking to a draft pick who's a legitimate, our competition all are legit experienced agents, he'll hire based on fit, feel. And that's where, Colin, you mentioned, be honest, be yourself, have some integrity, because the best way to get thrown out is to lie about something. Okay. Get caught in a lie and you're done on that one. You're out. Okay. So, sell what your strengths and get to know. I always tell my guys, build the relationship. Like when they call me and say, hey, Joe, we're recruiting this guy out of Victorville. Will you call the dad? Because I'm the dad's age. Yeah. But I want to know, are you talking to the kid? Yeah. How's it going? It's going well. Okay. Are you actually talking? Yes, I'm talking. Okay. Then I'll call the dad. If you told me you have not talked to the kid and you haven't built that relationship, then why am I calling the dad? We got no shot. Most good parents turn to their children and say, who do you want to hire? Okay. So if you don't have a relationship, then don't bother having me call the dad, because it's not going anywhere, but I'm happy to call the father on your behalf and talk about you as an employee and talk about what we would do as a company. And, this is usually on the really young ones that aren't even draft eligible that I'm talking about. But, your relationship with your potential client is what's going to get you in the door. And you're really, I hate to say it, most people in my business, I don't really think I'm that great, to be honest with you, but most people, it's all about who you represent. Okay, that we're only as good as who we represent. So let's just put it to you this way. I'd like to say there's some magical thing about getting clients. It's really not. It's you just be your best, put your strengths forward, be honest, have some integrity. And if you get lucky enough to have somebody hire you, you're on your way,
Yeah, no, absolutely. We really appreciate that. And definitely some important qualities and characteristics to keep in mind. Drew, if you have the time, has one more follow-up question,
Yeah,
then we can call
go
it.
ahead.
So he was curious how you sell one of your first clients to a GM and their team when that new client is new to the game.
Well, one thing that I haven't lost sight of is teams have huge staffs and tons of scouts and tons of analytics. So you got to remember, you're not really telling them it's something they don't already know. Okay. So you got to be careful in terms of getting credibility with a GM is, there's not anything analytic wise that you're probably going to tell them that they already haven't realized. But, one of the things when you're trying to sell a player to a GM is, it depends on the GM. It depends on that GM's personality. It depends on what they value. If you have experience and you've dealt with them a lot, you'll start to know what they value. You'll start to know what they're looking for. But you have to do your homework. You have to do your due diligence. You cannot go into a fight without being prepared, because I'll tell you, they're prepared. This is all they do 24/7. Yeah. 7 days a week. So when I go talk to a GM, if I make a flippant remark about how my client fits into their franchise, trust me, I've spent probably hour upon hour thinking about how my client fits into that franchise. Okay. And once in a while, you'll give them some information about how he fits in the franchise that he hasn't thought of. And then you're on to something. Okay. Or once in a while, you'll bring something up about your client's ability. My reliever client can throw back-to-back innings on back-to-back nights. He hadn't thought about that because he didn't see that in the analytics. But that's very helpful, especially for the starting. Takes pressure off the bullpen. It takes pressure off the starting staff. That's something he didn't really think about, and that creates more value for your client. Okay. But we spend a lot of hours and days and times looking at analytics. We use software for that. Today's game, you're pitching more that stuff, where when I first started, I was probably pitching more bubblegum stats. I talking like, the big stats on the baseball cards, just
Yeah.
because it seemed like that's what GMs were interested back then. Like, how many home runs does he have?
Yeah.
Now they're more interested in how many extra, home runs or power is still important, but how many extra base hits does he have? There's analytics that are more valuable to GMs. And if you know the GM you're talking to, that he values WAR more than the GM at the Angels values WAR. You know what I mean? Like, that's a stat that, so you got to know your audience, know who's in the room, know who you're talking to, and you got to do your homework. We don't go into any of these discussions cold. Okay. Because if you go in cold, you're probably getting worked on that deal,
Yeah.
and we're in a constant state of preparation all year long. I have probably 3 or 4 arbitration cases this fall. Those cases don't go to trial till February of 2022. It's May 26th. We're working on them now.
Wow.
And that's how far in advance we get prepared for those kinds of negotiations.
Yeah. Wow. That is really impressive and commendable preparation. And I just got 1 or 2 more quick questions, if that's all right.
Yeah.
So in speaking of those deals and stuff, like when you're negotiating with teams and on players' behalfs for their contracts and whatnot, how do you kind of balance trying to get like the most money out of the deal for your client? And obviously down the line, that gets to you a little bit as well. How do you balance that while also not turning off the team too much?
Oh, that's a fine line you're always walking. And you guys will find this in any negotiation. You got to be careful because, you got to know where their, as we call it, their choke point is, where they'll just walk away.
Yeah.
And how do you figure that out? It's understanding the value of the player that you're negotiating on behalf of. And that takes a lot of work to figure out what an 8th inning guy is worth. Okay. Yeah. And then persuading it in a way that you appear to be reasonable will keep them at the table. Okay. Because your job is to persuade that general manager to come over to your point of view. Okay. And come to a meeting of the minds. And that's his job too. But if you come unprepared and you start throwing numbers out because you think it's fun throwing darts and overvaluing people, you will turn off the other side and they will get up from the table and walk away. Have I had that happen to me? Yes. Okay. I have had that happen to me. Nothing goes perfectly, but at the same time, if I think a team's being unreasonable, I'll get up from the table and walk away. But that's always a fine line. And if a player asks me, well, what am I worth? I give them ranges. I tell them what I think the market's worth. Yeah. And, with experience, I generally come in with what I predicted. But there's some outliers where for who knows what, I either get more money than I predicted or I get less because I didn't factor in that his medicals were bad that we're sending around the teams, or I'm just, typically we know what we factor those in, but again, there could be a reason we don't sound reasonable in our demand.
Yeah. Absolutely. I really like that stuff about, knowing their choke point and being reasonable and prepared, maybe trying to get them in your shoes and go into their shoes a little bit. And then my very last question for tonight, thanks for staying a couple extra minutes. We really appreciate it. What are some of the most important qualities and characteristics for successful individuals for yourself? And how could people like us who may wish to, someday get into a similar place as yours as an agent, how can we go about like developing some of those qualities and characteristics?
Well, first off, I think you really need to enjoy, what you do, and really, you know, I think you need to like to be around people. I think you have to like counseling people. Um, this is a very much a relationship driven business. So you need to keep those relationships going. Um, and most businesses are like that, to be honest with you. So, but you need to be out in the field. You need to be around players. You need to be a game. You need to be where the clients are. Um, I'm in my office right now by myself. If I saw one of my other agents walk in here, my response would be, "What are you doing here?" Shouldn't there be a game that you're at, or something that you're at, because you need to be someplace. You know, I but if those are all, I'll tell you what, we're in a counseling / sales job.
Okay.
And say a lot of people sales makes a lot of people uncomfortable. People, it's difficult to sell. It's uncomfortable to sell. It's uncomfortable to hear no, or that costs too much, or I don't like this, or you're too unreasonable. It's uncomfortable when there's pushback. Okay, but salespeople like it because it's a challenge, and when you get to a yes, there's a physical, like, achievement. There's a
It's
reward.
payday.
There's a rush. Yeah,
Yeah.
and most salespeople like that, and that's why. And by the way, even on the franchise side, the most successful people in pro franchises are salespeople. They come from the sponsorship department. They're salespeople who become the team president and all that. On the business side, there's two sides of every franchise: the on the field side, like who's playing second base that night, and then the business side, who's selling sponsorships and all that. And in our business, it's a lot of sales, and you're either selling a team, you're selling a player, you're selling a shoe company, a back company. Okay, so you got to be comfortable in doing that. My advice would be to go to law school.
Yeah.
If you feel like those are some things that you like doing, I think you could better hone those skills in law school. And by the way, I don't make up the rules. Like, I'm going to say a good percentage of sports agents are lawyers.
Yeah.
And they were even before I got in the business. So this isn't anything new that I'm telling you. But I think law school does a couple things for you. It helps you to become a deal maker and a solution, purveyor of how to get things done, how to get parties to come together, how to structure contracts. And it helps with the sales, knowing how to do all that stuff. Okay. And then when I was in law school, if I were you, I would join the Sports Lawyers Association, because that's the one association that seems to have membership from agents, general counsels who work in sports, labor lawyers. There's a lot of people. They have a student rate. There's a lot of people in that organization, and they have events. An organization that have like this, where they have events where you can go meet people, that's how you're going to get a job. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
but you guys grew up in an age where you just upload your resume to an app, and then it gets sent out, and then you just sit back and wait for the answers. When I came out, there wasn't none of that, so we had to go meet people. You would give out resumes, but you actually had to go find somebody who was interested in hiring you, and there's not enough of that going on. So if you really want to work in sports, you need to get out there and get internships with a team, would be my first choice, because there's more opportunity for internships there. And that way you would meet people who work in sports who ultimately could decide to hire you. Okay. Or get an internship with a sports network, or get an internship with a sports marketing company or a sports branding company. Those lead to jobs in sports, and even lead to jobs at agencies. Okay. So if you can't get the number one catcher in the Pac-12, go try and get a job at the compliance department at a UCLA so you can meet people. Go get a job at the sports marketing company so you can meet people. You'll end up at the agency anyways, or you'll end up working for a team, because now you have a lot of sports know-how and you actually met people who do the hiring. Okay. So, I can't express enough that you need to get out and meet people who work in this business, because just because it's not a job interview doesn't mean they aren't thinking about you when a job comes up. I can't tell you how many times our former interns end up in jobs just because they were in the right place at the right time.
Mhm.
So don't sit back and keep sending out resumes. Try and email, call, do whatever you can to get in front of somebody. And in fact, I was on a panel somewhere. This is a few years ago. I can't remember the name of your athletic director.
Well, right now it's Martin Jarman, but previously it was Dan Guerrero.
Okay, no, it may be Martin. Did Martin used to work at San Diego State or
To be
USD?
honest, I do not believe so.
Okay, somebody. I
But
was
we,
on a
we have a good
panel.
amount of
I was on a panel, and it wasn't maybe it was Guerrero. I can't. It was either Guerrero or somebody else on your told a story where somebody was working in interning or somebody. This was it. A student in San Diego emailed Dan Guerrero and asked for an internship right at the moment when Dan was thinking, God, I need an intern. Okay. Wow. He was just thinking about it that day. And this guy who was at USD sent him a resume and said, hey, Mr. Guerrero, wondered if you have any internship possibilities in your sports department. And he called him personally and said, yeah, I need somebody 2 days a week. Oh, you're in San Diego. Then obviously you're not right. No, I'll drive up every day. And that person is now the athletic director at some big university. But the point being is there's always timing when you send your email or call or meet somebody. You never know when they're looking for somebody, and then you end up getting that job.
Yeah. So it'd be safe to say it sounds like maybe go with your gut instinct.
Absolutely. Any creativity is warranted. Like it'll be worth it in the end. And by the way, if you get an internship now, I always tell people they call, hey Joe, I got an internship at the Lakers, but I want to really work for the Dodgers someday. Just work at the Lakers. It's sports. Just do that job. And by the way, you'll be the first one there. And when people are going out for drinks after, you're going to that too. You're gonna meet people. You're not just coming in from 9 to 5. Like you're meeting people that work there, and you're going to become friends with them. And by the time you leave at the end of the semester, they're going to say that guy or that woman was great. And when we have a job opportunity, we got to get that person in here.
Yeah. No, I really like that. And I think if there's one huge theme for tonight, it's that a lot of these things are relationship driven. And so that's definitely
absolutely. I can't say that enough.
To keep it in mind.
I still do my meetings with recruits in person because I believe that people need to look at you in the eyes and hear you speak. I think the same goes, for when people are hiring. They'll hire you because of your resume or whatever, or you're a student at UCLA, but there's something about you that they want to work with you, and they want you in the office every day. And you can't get that from just emailing your resume or posting it on a website. You can get that from getting in front of these people.
And people want to work with people they like, and
it's just human nature. I don't make up the rules. It's just human nature. Even when we go to hire somebody, I make sure they meet everyone in the office just in case somebody has a problem, because we all got to work long hours, close quarters. You know what I mean? Like everybody needs to get along, because if somebody's miserable, I don't want to make anybody miserable,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, we could chat for hours on end, but we really appreciate it, Joe. And thank you so much for staying the extra 15 minutes.
No. My pleasure. It's not a problem. I appreciate you guys having me tonight. And, good luck to all of you. Certainly being members of a group like this is a big help, that you guys are networking and meeting other people. I can assure you 7 or 8 years from now, you'll say that guy that works for the Cleveland Browns was in the UCLA sports business group with me. And I remember being on that panel with him. Do you see what I mean? Like you guys will all end up in jobs and you'll lean on people. I have ex-Brown, one of my ex-teammates is the president of the Cleveland Browns. You know what I mean? Like that's just how life goes. People end up working in different areas, and you'll keep in touch with those people, and those people will lead to job and business opportunities. So keep in touch with one another, and good luck to all of you. And then maybe I'll see some of you in my law school classes, since I'm spread between 2 law schools now. Maybe I'll see some of you guys soon.
Well, hey, again, really appreciate it. You know, it's going to take hard work, but it sounds like the future is definitely bright, and hopefully we can be in similar shoes as you someday. And good luck at SC in the fall. I'd say peace out, but fight off, go Bruins. But take care. All right.
All right. Thank you guys very much.